a line, which the rest of it may be wonderful things to have.
Right, but you
But
can
they're
definitely
not-
run leaner.
They're not core government functions. I says, is there enough cutting there to make it all come out? He said, well, yes, there is. So in other words, we could attack it at the spending. Now, each penny of spending has a constituency. You know, I mean, if you take a penny out of the, endangered flippy bird, or whatever the bird's called, the endangered flippy bird salvation fund, they've got $40, and you cut it down to $39.99, well, you'll have somebody sitting before you giving you their 3 minutes of bad mouth, at the
Right.
next meeting. But you might have to do some cutting. Now, I don't dislike Commissioner Snyder. I think he's a good guy. And I don't even resent him beating me very much. But I think he's wrong on that. I think we can afford police. As a matter of fact, Commissioner Caragiulo said, well, why would we even have a city if we didn't have any police? And he's right. Did you know that the last 2 shootings were not city police officers? They were deputies. A deputy shot Tyler's man, and a deputy shot the fellow who tried to run him over with the Jeep. It was deputies. Well, they might be in the city, but they were the ones that did the shooting. Now, the city police officers, they might hurt you if you give them a hard time, but they won't kill you. And I think that's a good thing, not being killed.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The police, city police, they know their city, and they know the kind of crap they're going to have to put up with, and they know how to deal it without pumping the guy full of lead. They do.
So what are your feelings on the police oversight panel? We have 2. We have the advisory board now, and we also have the complaints committee, which between the 2 costs us about $135,000 to administer. So do you feel the taxpayers getting their money's worth out of those?
I don't think that these things are core function of government. I think that there's a constituency for it. I think if you were to defund it and tell them, well, we're sorry, we can't support this right now, I think that the ACLU would probably be upset, and my response to that would be, you want to see it continue? You come up with the money.
You
to
pay
fund
for it, right. So you're for trimming that as part of the excess fat.
Well, I'm in favor of getting it out of the budget. I mean, if the ACLU
Right, if somebody else
to,
wants to pick up the tab, God bless them.
yeah,
Right.
we have
Well, the thing that was interesting was I had Eileen Normile in, and we interviewed her, and she's actually
know her. Who is
she actually sits on the advisory board, not the complaint committee, the advisory board.
Uh-huh.
So they're not the ones that had the near fist fight or any of that stuff.
Near fist fight.
They're a little bit better well behaved. Yeah, the
You
complaint
had-
committee, they almost had a fist fight between 2 of the board members. Yeah.
Well, that's another reason to cut the funding.
So, but when we had her in here, the thing that was interesting was, we've been funding this since 2009, and in talking to her,
What, this radio show's been funding it?
No, meaning
The
the
city.
city
Okay,
has
the
been
city.
funding these
Okay.
new panels since 2009.
Okay.
And as far as the advisory panel goes, long story short, she's saying the panel has undergone some drastic changes recently. So it's basically a new panel. It's called the same thing, but it's a new panel.
Mm.
And in talking to the people on the panel, including her, I believe that they're well-intentioned, and they may even actually serve a purpose. Like they might come up with some really good recommendations and things to give to the city. But I asked her the same question. Are the taxpayers getting their money's worth? And she comes back with, well, I don't know. It's like, okay, well, why? Because, it's this new panel, and there hasn't been enough time for them to act on any of the things that they've recommended. So one, whatever they put forward has to be enacted by either the commissioners or the police chief for it to have any effect, because they can put things out all day, and if nobody acts on it, then there's no point in doing it. And my thing was, well, wait a minute, so we've already been paying for it since 2009, and we can't say what we've got for the money already spent. Doesn't that alone mean we should just get rid of it and save the money?
Doesn't it? I think it does.
Yeah.
But if the ACLU or somebody else wants to fund it, they can just have at this all day, present their findings to the city commission. The city commission will say thank you very much and file it. And
Well, speaking of the ACLU, what do you think about as far as the city? Let me back up and give you one example. One of the problems that we had when we were discussing before we started recording, I was explaining to you some of the problems we had downtown here at Five Points Park and with the businesses here. And one of the most powerful tools that we had to be able to clean up our neighborhood was the ability to trespass. Now, our particular building, when I say our building, I'm talking about, we don't own the building, but we worked with Costco, who does own it.
Costco, like the company that has these discount stores?
No, they just sounds the same.
Different Costco.
Different, right.
Okay.
I think it's Costo, or it's the way it's spelled.
Costa.
It's spelled different, but it sounds the same.
Costato.
Something like that. So,
Oh, yeah, from the Costa family from Sicily, yes.
so we were working with them, and they're unique to other buildings downtown in that normally they only own the building and they give the sidewalk to the city or county, and they still owned the sidewalk. So technically, the sidewalks around this building were private property. And they were able to tell anybody who was renting from them, any of these stores here, they said, we give you the authority to trespass on our behalf. So that was the tool that we started using with the police, between that and trespassing the library after hours with the county, to start cleaning up downtown. And it had a dramatic effect. I mean, there's nobody that can argue that just based on the number of stores that we've rented and talking to everybody down here.
So the guy with his tongue on your window,
right.
He got trespassed out.
Well, that happened after they took that tool away from the police.
See.
And the reason they took that tool away is because they found out that Fournier, who put the trespass ordinance together, didn't put in a proper provision or procedure for the appeal. Now, I completely agree that they should be allowed to appeal. That's how it's supposed to work. But what happened was, because that procedure wasn't in there, the ACLU went down to the city, threatened, and they said, we're halting everything. It took him 6 months to finally get a revised trespass ordinance with the appeal process in there. Well, a lot can happen in 6 months. And it did. And that was where things started getting worse again. And then now recently, thankfully, they've gotten a whole lot better. So my question to you is one, would you take a tougher stance with the ACLU? Like in a situation like that, one, we could tell them, hey, because we had already consulted other attorneys, not just Fournier. Obviously, he's going to be interested in just trying to keep his job. But we could have gone to them and said, look, we're working on putting those things in place. Obviously, don't make it take 6 months, work to get it done in a month. But meanwhile, we're going to put in a temporary measure so that the cops give them a ticket they can fill out, bring it down, just something so that they have a method to appeal, but so that we didn't lose the tool that we needed to keep our downtown safe. And it just seemed like the easiest course of action for them was to say, I'll just take it away. We don't need it anymore. And it really did make the businesses down here suffer. So I was just curious what your opinion on that was.
Well, I have to make a disclosure here. You may not believe this, but at one time, I was a member of the ACLU in about 1969, 1970. I was a member for 1 year. Being a member of the ACLU, I found that somewhere in this year, reading their magazine, going to their events and talking, I came away considering them hypocrites. That it should probably be called the American Civil Liberals Union rather than the American Civil Liberties Union, because they claimed that they were in favor of the liberties of people that were on the other side politically, but really the cases they would pick from the other side were just cherry-picked so that they were so outrageous that they knew they'd lose, and it was just a gesture sending lawyers to appear on behalf of, say, the Ku Klux Klan or what have you. You know, I mean, did you know that in 1971, the Sarasota Democratic Party formally severed ties with the Ku Klux Klan in 1971?
That's interesting.
I wouldn't have known this, but I attended an event in about 2006, 2007 at Martin Luther King Park, and I was sitting as a volunteer at the table which was being promoted by the Black Republicans, and right across from us was a table which was the Sarasota Democrats. They had a nice handwritten sign declaring that fact. That this was for Juneteenth, which is a celebration of the day when some people in Texas learned that they had been emancipated a couple of years ago. Communications in the 1860s were slow, and so they'd been free for a couple of years, but they didn't know.
Wow.
So anyway, so they started celebrating Juneteenth, and I think it was in the middle of June somewhere. And so the Democrats put this sign up thinking that it would be a comfort to the black people to know that since 1971, the Sarasota Democratic Party no longer had formal ties with the Ku Klux Klan. Now, of course, the Republican Party was founded to end slavery. That was the whole purpose there. And during Reconstructions, all the blacks were Republicans. Blacks didn't start going to the Democratic Party until the 1920s or so, when the organizers went downtown and they started saying, "Hey, those Republicans aren't on your side. Come and be Democrats, and we'll take care of you." And they've been doing that ever since, in the organizing in the black community. Why 150 years after the Civil War will we even have to have segregation anymore? It's starting to be an embarrassment. We have to start thinking of ourselves as Americans rather than hyphenated Americans.
Right.
But anyway, I thought it was kind of interesting that the Sarasota Democratic Party thought that was something to be proud of. It would have been more proud to say they distanced themselves from the Ku Klux Klan in 1871 rather than 1971. But anyway, and I wish I'd have taken a picture of that. Oh, that would be so. But I didn't. I didn't have a camera with me. So you have to take my word for it. Maybe some of them will admit it. I don't know. If they admit it, they're honest. Yeah.
Well, but back to the ACLU, because for me personally, as well as I think a lot of the businesses downtown, one of the big sticking points is, we had another incident down here with the Occupy Wall Street movement. A lot of that's calmed down now, but at one point they were coming out into our park every weekend, having rallies during the week, and that's all fine. But there were incidents where we had the one where they were actually chalking downtown. And there was the one guy, I'm sure you saw, Christopher Young, that this was all in the papers, and where Officer Neary ended up arresting him, and then they were saying that it was unlawfully done and all that. And basically the ACLU came out to back him. Michael Barfield went out to Five Points Park and gave a whole big speech and all that. And my question is, you were mentioning before about how a felon ranked better than you in the first election. Well, here you have Michael Barfield, who's heading the ACLU, who multiple felonies.
Michael Barfield has a record.
And
my God, has clay feet. Does he really? What was he involved in?
You are joking.
What was he involved in?
I mean, it's ridiculous, the stuff. One of them, he was, supposedly he was in the Navy. He was in the Navy. He was accused of giving Navy secrets to Russian spies.
Did they pay him pretty good?
Yeah, his record is pretty long. He was convicted of many felonies. He tried to frame a judge.
Tried to frame a judge?
Tried to frame a judge because he was up for something else. And, he tried to get that judge disqualified by hiring 2 private investigators. And it goes on. I mean, the articles are all online. I can send you all that. But the point is...
Well, he must have money if he could do all this.
Reports on these things have been put out there. Mm-hmm. I know commissioners are well aware of it. But yet nobody stands up when he comes down and goes to get a settlement for these people. And, I heard that we wrote a check to Young somewhere in the neighborhood of 120, 130,000.
Young.
Christopher Young, the gentleman that this happened with, who claimed to be a disabled war vet, and then there were people who supposedly served with him and said he had been kicked out. He was disabled, but not while he was in service.
Disabled.
So basically, and then after they do the settlement with him, now the guy's ends up buying like a big van and is down in the park with this big van, they giving out food and everything else. So my question is, as a commissioner, would you stand up there to the ACLU and say, look, enough's enough? Fine, we believe this is what's right. We're going to battle you on this. We're not just going to write you a check for anything that you come knocking on our door.
I think I already did. I think I posted something on my Facebook that it's critical of the ACLU. Maybe I should have put it on my website. I don't know. I think it was a post on Facebook, but certainly I am not going to. I'm not going to be a fan of the ACLU. Well, I mean, if they come out with something that's correct, or seems correct, I'll look at it.
Right, absolutely.
But not going to say, well, if it's the ACLU, then
just write a check.
I mean, it's like, all these lefty organizations. Well, the National Socialist Party of Germany was a lefty organization. You're not supposed to say the N-word, but, the left hasn't changed much in 100 years,
Right.
So, no, I'm not in the pocket of the ACLU. Actually, I'm more in the pocket of the developers, which is not very,
No, well, even with the developers, and again, this is just from my personal experience. I have seen that there is a small group of them who've been around for a while, who do have a monopoly on certain things.
And they've got a monopoly on commissioners.
Yeah, and I do believe a lot of that is starting to change, though, even in the politics. So
it'll change if I win.
You have to be careful, mm-hmm. and this I'm speaking to everybody, mm-hmm. in lumping all of the developers together, because it's just like with any group. It's a little bit more complicated than that, and I think that there are some that are out there that are trying to break up the good old boys, so to speak, to try to bring in some new blood and see what we can do.
They can't do anything that will hit their bottom line. When a man is building a little development, he's building himself a little development. He wants to go up maybe a little higher. Well, could we have some density? Well, to begin with, the ACLU will be behind you for some reason. And what people forget, and what the developers hope they'll forget, is that, like a certain in the pocket of the developers candidate says, if you build it, they will come. Yes, they will come. And they'll come in cars. While the cars are there, the cars have to park somewhere. And after whatever it is over, they will leave in cars, and those cars will clog the roads, and everybody has to use the same roads. And while you're stuck in traffic, your car is still using gas. 10 years ago, Scope estimated there was an extra $600-700 a year from idling in traffic. That's your money if you drive. I bet you do.
Well, but the other side of it is too, those people coming into the community, for somebody who has a business on the corner, they might stop and get a pizza there now. They might,
or not. Generally speaking, you get the big development and the roads fail. Like 301 failed. And they fail for a while. It's the state who's looking at the roads. Finally, the state says, all right, whether you like it or not, you've got to improve this road. And they do. And there's a certain amount of it as an unfunded mandate on the city. But then there's state money too. But the state money isn't free. It comes from your gas taxes. So you pay taxes. You already paid for the gas that you spend idling. And when the construction's going on, you're really going to be idling.
Say, what if you have a Volt?
Well, then you just have to pay $10,000 every 5 years for a battery. But anyway, so it's much cheaper
I do understand
if you trade it at 3.5 years. But the Volt is $40,000 with the government subsidy of another $10,000. Okay, but anyway, okay, getting back to where you are stuck in traffic now. On the other side of that barricade is the mom and pop business that you think made out. Well, they go broke. They go right out of business and declare bankruptcy up and down the street, both sides. And we saw that happen on 301. You have to do the concurrency. The same time the building's going up, you have to be building out the roads. And hopefully you do it at night and don't drive the little businesses out of business. And it's not easy. It's not easy at all. I'm aware of the developers' problems. I like them better than they think I do. And but you have to look at the rest of the community. You can't just say, what a beautiful development. And yeah, we're going to get an extra $10 million a year in taxes. Oh, yeah, sure. You know, but you're going to have $10 million on the other side, social welfare costs, all the neighborhood effects. You know, so it's going to cost you more than you're going to get unless you calculate those other costs and pack them into it out front. You know, yes, that will slow development, but it will be.
Right, but long term, that's not preventing development. That's just proper planning to.
Well, it's making them pay for their own mess.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Mm.
Now, I'm going to ask you one last thing. As far as the CCNA goes, do you have the support of the CCNA as a candidate?
The CCNA does not support candidates officially.
Officially, they don't. But they definitely do back certain candidates, and we know who they usually support. So my question to you, I mean, listen, one thing we talk about a lot on the shows is the alleged shadow government in this city. Okay, and Susan Chapman is supposed to be one of the three main players in that shadow government. And we've even had commissioners sit here in this room and tell us that they have to go back and give reports to her. So